My name is Jeremy Walton and I have one question. Does camera resolution really matter? Of course it does. Or does it? It does. Or does it? Let's go! I'm not gonna lie, some days I've literally done nothing but watch movies all day. After watching a lot of new and old movies, I started thinking about resolution. If you're a filmmaker, that's probably something that comes up a lot when you talk about camera specs, filming, workflows, cropping, down res, up res, settings, variable frame rates. Yeah, it comes up a lot. So for this video, I'm going to dive into 3 topics that I think will cover resolution from cinema all the way to a specific app for your iPhone. That way we can see a few different ways resolution gets applied, and more importantly, how you can use resolution to make better choices in your workflow and shooting style. To start this discussion off, the first thing we're going to look at is resolution in cinema. When it comes to resolution, what we're working with is 3 main resolutions. To keep it simple, HD, that's 1920 by 1080 resolution, which is pretty common. Cinema 4K, that's 4096 by 2160, and 8K, let's call it 7680 by 4320, with cameras recording in higher resolutions. There's a few other in-between resolutions I'm sure you're aware of that we don't need to include in this video, but everything we discuss still applies to those resolutions as well. When I think about HDN going to the movies, I remember seeing Once Upon a Time in Mexico, written and directed by the cinematographer, editor, composer, production designer, all by Robert Rodriguez. That's multitasking. It wasn't the first movie, but the first I saw in the theater that was shot on the Sony f900 camera. A workhorse in the industry, especially in television, and shot a resolution of 1920 by 1080. It's a camera I actually learned on, which shot HD cam tapes. Yes, a $100,000 camera shooting tape. If I remember correctly, HD cam tape was 8-bit and HD cam SR was 10-bit. Each tape was about $50 and could shoot around 50 minutes. Now today I'm shooting on my GH5S in 4K 10-bit 422 on a tiny SD card. Tape versus SD card, $50 every time you insert a new tape or something you can use over and over. Technology can be great. Once Upon a Time in Mexico was shot for $30 million, featuring A-list actors. When asked about shooting digital, Robert Rodriguez said, "I did a whole comparison, side by side, pros and cons, before doing Mexico, and the only reason I could see to shoot on film was nostalgia. If you were to compare the hard cost of shooting on film to shooting on tape, you'd save millions of dollars shooting on tape." When I watched that film, my eyes didn't burn from the HD resolution on the big screen. It looked great and I enjoyed the film. Jump forward a few years and the film Slumdog Millionaire, directed by Danny Boyle, won the Academy Award for Best Cinematography. This was a mix of film and digital, but primarily shot on the Silicon Imaging SI2K camera. When discussing the production, they actually used Apple MacBook Pros for the camera recorders and rigged them into backpacks. Because of the heat in India, the laptops were packed in dry ice and the production went through 45 pounds of dry ice daily. Can you imagine? Like literally, can you imagine? I bring up these 2 films to remind us where we came from. People get mad about specs, but multi-million-dollar movies that win Academy Awards have done more with less when it comes to resolution. So don't think you can't tell your story with a mirrorless camera. Yes, I know they had bigger budgets than most independent filmmakers, but compared to some studio movies, they didn't. They either embraced new technology or figured out a way to shoot their movie in a way that worked for them. That's what you need to remember. I love technology and would love to always shoot with the best of the best, especially if I had a big budget, enough time, and crew. Yeah, I would consider 8K Red or the Aries 65, but it's always a good idea to remember where it all started, if you don't have those options. Now that we established where we came from, let's get into what's been happening over the last few years and see how filmmakers are working with resolution. The big name in resolution is Red with their Monstro 8K VistaVision camera with a resolution of 8192 by 4320. If you want high resolution, then there you go. Price tag for just the brain is $54,500. So there's that. Another name in the game is the Arri Alexa 65 that has a resolution of 6560 by 3100. That camera as of now is rental only. I'm not going to get into the debate of which is better. That's not the point. I will get into how these cameras are used. We do have to take a little step back though. Our options today weren't the same not too long ago with these two companies, especially with the Alexa. You should know who Roger Deakins is, a well-known cinematographer who shot the film Skyfall, which was directed by Sam Mendes. It was the first Bond movie shot entirely digital with an Alexa, and at the time didn't have a true 4K sensor. When asked about 4K in a Q&A, Arri Camera System product manager Mark Shipman-Mueller said, "There's just not an urgent need for it. When you have Roger Deakins, adored for his film work, shooting Skyfall, and he is comfortable up-resing to 4K and showing on IMAX, I think it speaks for itself." That's right, for IMAX they up-res the footage. I know on YouTube you hear all the time how that's a bad thing, that you should always shoot at a higher resolution and downscale your footage to get the best image, even if you're shooting YouTube videos that mostly get viewed on a cell phone. Here we have an Academy Award winning cinematographer completely comfortable up-resing his footage to IMAX screens. When asked about it, he said, "The images I have seen in the IMAX theater are simply superb." I think that should put things into perspective when it comes to your shooting style. I'm not saying you have to listen to Roger Deakins, but you might want to listen to Roger Deakins. Now, Arri has come out with higher resolution cameras, but it was on their own time. That's what happens with advancing technologies. At some point, the technology is there. At some point, we will all have 4K TVs. At some point, all cameras will have 4K or higher resolutions. But right now, because certain technology is available, doesn't always mean you need to have it or something will automatically be better because of it. At some point, up-resing won't be a thing because resolution has advanced so much, we won't have to do it. Again, just remember where this all started from. So what about RED cameras? I'm glad you asked. If you want to hear some great information, I have one name for you, Michael Cioni. He was the founder, president, and CEO of Light Iron until Panavision acquired the company, and then he went on to be the senior vice president of innovation at Panavision, and now currently the global senior vice president of innovation at Frame.io. That's a loaded resume. So do your homework and check out all those companies, and you can get an idea of what he's contributed to the film industry. If you head over to Frame.io's YouTube channel, you can see a video he did on universal sensor size. An interesting topic and idea. Even though it's about sensor size, he brings up resolution when he talks about their extraction technique and says, when you have a lot of resolution, you can afford to throw some of it away. A good example of this is the video he did on the post-production workflow of Ender's Game. An older movie, but a lot of what he says still applies today. He talks about shooting 5K full frame with a 4K extraction with the ability to reframe, which is a technique that still gets used today. It's a really good look into the thought process of a post-production workflow that starts in pre-production. I'll put links in the description to everything I talk about, so definitely have a look. Some of this may sound familiar if you're a fan of David Fincher and the way he shoots. I did do a video, What is Cinematic Filmmaking, Episode 2, that specifically talks about his style and how production is run on set of Mindhunter. So if you're interested, go check that out. Fincher applied the same principle, shoot for more resolution than you need, extraction technique for his films as well. The Social Network shot 4.5K, mastered in 2K. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo was shot in 5K and mastered in 4K. And Gone Girl was shot in 6K and mastered in 5K. All this was done for stabilization, repositioning, tracking, and split screen. When talking about Gone Girl, Fincher goes on to say, nearly every single image is manipulated to make the camera operation as perfect as possible. I want people to forget that the camera's being moved around by someone. I bring this up because of one thing I hear a lot of people talk about, which is with higher resolutions, you can just punch in and grab a close-up. While that statement is true, I think that's a wrong way to think. I'm not saying it's a wrong thing to do. You just gotta be careful with your approach to that statement. I don't know for sure, but I would assume David Fincher gets the coverage he needs and doesn't use an 8K master to pull from. Yes, it could potentially help or save you in a pinch, but I'm not sure if shooting high resolution to pull coverage from will be a standard workflow when filming a movie. That's why I say be careful with the language you use and how you interpret that language. There's also another reason, but I'll get to that shortly. So what does this all mean for you? Whether that's shooting for YouTube or client work, how can you use a practical approach to resolution? To better understand this, I want to discuss something called a jump cut. A good definition would be a cut in film editing in which two sequential shots of the same subject are taken from camera positions that vary only slightly, if at all. The film most commonly associated with jump cuts is the highly influential film Breathless, directed by Jean-Luc Godard. We see jump cuts all the time, especially on YouTube. People will punch in to make a point. It's pretty popular. If you have the time, take a look at this film. There's a lot of theories to why jump cuts were used and how it all originated. Like I said before, it's a good idea to know where everything started from and how it was used. Maybe you'll have a better appreciation next time you use a jump cut. So what if you don't want to use a jump cut? There are plenty of situations where you really don't want to use one because it can be jarring or look like a mistake. We actually have rules set up to avoid this. It's called the 30-degree rule. There's actually a lot of rules that I can't cover in one video, but since we're talking about resolution, let's focus on the 30-degree rule in an interview setup, which can easily be any kind of dialogue scene when you want to get coverage, or even YouTube if you don't want to punch in. The 30-degree rule, if we take this setup, would look something like this. We have the camera right in front filming myself, but if we move the camera to get coverage or had two cameras for an interview, we would need to move the camera 30 degrees around the subject to avoid the two shots looking too similar. Even if the shots are different, for example, a medium to a wide shot, the same rules apply. Having a higher resolution image in this kind of setup really doesn't work if we're thinking we can just grab a close-up from the original image. That would result in a jump cut, which we're trying to avoid. That's also why I mentioned David Fincher. Pulling a close-up from a wide shot, even if it's at a high resolution, will result in two shots from the same camera position. That's why it's important to get coverage no matter what resolution you're shooting in. This brings up an important issue when we look at the Filmic Pro DoubleTake app. As we all know, we have multiple lenses on our phones now that the app can utilize and film all at once. The problem is they're all from the same camera position. If you check out Cody Wanner's YouTube channel, he actually did a video on this when the app came out and was really the only video I saw mentioning this issue. So props to him on that. He does have a little workaround you may want to try if you have limited options. Just remember the rules we've already talked about. If you have a two-camera setup, a higher resolution can be your friend. So you want to shoot in 4K, and here's why. I can basically get two shots from each camera. Usually my A camera is a wide shot that I can punch in for a medium shot. My B camera is usually a medium shot that I can punch in for a close-up, or vice versa, just depends on what I'm shooting. This basically gives me 4 shots to choose from, with 2 shots being from the same angle. I can always cut from A camera to B camera, just not from shot to shot within one camera. Now, if you add B-roll to the mix, you start to increase your options. Planned right and with a higher resolution, you'll get the coverage you need from a wide angle to a close-up. You won't have to sacrifice quality of the image, and you'll be able to utilize all your shots without having to use a jump cut. It's all about understanding the tools you're working with and the reasons why you're using them. I can say in the filmmaking world there isn't a one-thing-fix-all solution. It's a bunch of things brought together to get a good end result. I know I covered a lot in this video, but that's what it takes if I ask the question, does camera resolution really matter? And with all that, did we answer it? Let's go with, it depends. As we can see, in some cases yes, and in some cases no. It's like asking what's the best lens. It depends. If you're a filmmaker, you're going to be put in these kinds of situations, and it's going to be up to you to determine what to do. If you do your research and take an interest in these kinds of questions, you can see certain productions use specific cameras and some use a mix of cameras. For example, aerial or heavy visual effect shots. There's a lot more we could discuss, and I'll definitely be working on more videos like this because I think they're important and hopefully they help. Well, there you have it. Does camera resolution really matter? Hope you enjoyed the video. Hit that like button because there's definitely more in the way. Subscribe so you don't miss out. But until then, comment below if there's any topics you'd like me to cover in future videos. And as for this episode, it's a wrap.